Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser, coming to you from Pensacola, Florida, where we're going to hear some blues later on this evening and mix and kind of get involved in some of the interesting things happening here in Pensacola. A lot of guys with dark eyeglasses and baseball hats. It seems almost like a CIA confab or something. Stacey.
I think you'll find it's NSA down here, if anything. It's interesting because we're on the Seville quarter of Pensacola. It's like 100 years old. This building is 100 years old. We're in a bar. You might hear some noise behind us because we've been here for about half an hour and it's been super quiet. And suddenly, as soon as we start recording, everybody starts working behind us. So you'll hear some noise around us, but hopefully we'll have some B-roll to show you the ceiling, the walls, how amazing this structure is. We have these giant moose heads on the wall. And that's relevant to this first headline here, the construction, how solid this foundation is.
How so?
Versus...
Tell us everything.
A 58-story skyscraper in San Francisco is tilting and sinking, and residents say their multi-million-dollar condos are nearly worthless. Millennium Tower is a luxury residential high-rise that has sunk 17 inches and tilted 14 inches since it was completed in 2008. Though an inspection by the city showed it's safe to occupy, the situation has sparked an exodus from the building. Residents say they are selling multi-million-dollar condos at a loss, with the value of their homes tumbling by $320,000 on average. It's the city's fourth highest skyscraper. It's one of these luxury condos that has gone up in San Francisco. I believe we talked about this with Wolf Richter a few, 2-3 years ago. At that time, it was only tilting 4 inches. Now it's 14 inches, and they say it's safe.
Well, it's the Leaning Tower of Geeks, the Leaning Tower of Nerds over there in San Francisco. Have all these tourists over there with those photos and with the relationship shots of them keeping the tower up, and they'll get a lot of people doing those photos. It's a money maker. They'll make money on the Leaning Tower of Geeks in San Francisco, I predict.
So, well, let's go over some of the points that Business Insider points out here. It was completed in 2008. In the first 5 weeks of sales, Millennium Tower sold $100 million worth of condos. The San Francisco Chronicle reported the units ranged in price from $1.6 million to $10 million. And the developers of Millennium Tower, Millennium Partners, argue that construction nearby is to blame for any sinking or tilting. A city transportation hub, the Transbay Transit Center, broke ground next door in 2010. And they call it a process of dewatering. So when they were building this transportation hub next door, what they had to do is they had to drain all the water out of the ground in order to make sure that the ground under the transportation hub was stable.
It's subsidence, as they call it in the retail trade.
Yes.
This is San Francisco's 9/11. This is the geek apocalypse. Their $5 million condos are tilting and falling into the Bay Area. Oh my gosh.
Well, the important thing is actually San Francisco sits on the San Andreas Fault, which is known to have massive earthquakes. And the fact that the next door neighbor, the neighboring building, had to dewater suggests that this is ground prone to liquefaction. So this is really important when earthquakes happen and really bad things, buildings fall down. It's partly because the ground beneath them becomes like liquid. So any building, it doesn't matter how strong the structure is, it's going to fall.
Yeah, but there should be an app for that. Like Snapchat could build glasses with built-in kind of video cameras so that if the building starts to shake violently, the glasses automatically adjust for the violent shaking and you look like you're completely stable. So they shouldn't panic there because they've got an app for earthquake. They've got an app for the apocalypse. It's all solved.
So as I said, this building, the Millennium Tower, was not built into the bedrock. So this is quite important because Millennium Tower sits on land prone to liquefaction. The process by which loose sand and silt behave like liquid in the event of an earthquake. The seismic activity causes water pressure in the sediment to increase and grains of sand to lose contact with each other, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The soil may give out under large, heavy structures.
Well, you know, it's ironic that the Silicon Valley has people living in a tower that's about to be engulfed by silicon, which is basically sand. Sand is, Yeah, no, that's what it is. That's where that comes from. Sand. No?
Okay.
Is this why I haven't become a $500 billion player in San Francisco yet? I'm confusing these two things?
Well, anyway, so what I'm saying is here's a building. It's one of these mega structures. We've been covering it here in Keiser Report with Wolf Richter on wolfstreet.com, looking at the bubble in San Francisco. Property prices are booming, but now it turns out a lot of these projects were put up rapidly. They're not built into the bedrock. They've been dewatered, a situation nearby, so the ground is subsiding, and we have this giant structure tilting wildly. Now, speaking of not being built in the bedrock, I'm going to segue to another story here.
Really good segue there. It's subtle. I hardly noticed it.
Well, I thought you would run with segue. I know you like segue.
I have a Segway now, which I drive around the house and property with. It's the Segway Mini. They go up to 10 kilometers an hour.
So I'm going to try to draw an analogy between the Millennium Tower tilting by 14 inches, sunk 17 inches, not built into the bedrock, subject to collapse because of liquefaction, to the Democratic Party.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Harvey Weinstein. Okay, sorry.
No. We've already covered that. We're
Okay.
going back to the Democratic Party because right now they're still like seeking some sort of leader. They've thrown everything behind Hillary Clinton, and she was not built on solid liquid foundation of a bedrock. So here we have the headline: Democratic advantage for 18 might not be what it seems. A Democratic advantage in preference for the 2018 midterm elections fades to insignificance among the most likely voters in the latest ABC News Washington Post poll. Signs of the Democrats' enduring challenges in turning out their voters in off-year contests. So in a hypothetical national ballot, Max, Democratic congressional candidates hold a robust 11-point lead over their GOP counterparts, but it's a dead heat if you look at just those who are likely to vote.
Right.
So it's a dead heat between the Democrats and the Republicans, despite all the craziness of the Trump administration.
Well, Trump's popularity is on the way up. So he got rid of a lot of the garbage that he had to get done in year one, and now he's going to roll out some showcase programs, and of course the market keeps going higher. And the Hillary Clinton fans and Democrats, they have the problem of putting all of their efforts into chasing the fake Russiagate hoax. And therefore, they don't have the resources to go field new candidates that might have a chance in 2018. So if they were to drop the Russiagate hoax and focus on just finding candidates to run in 2018, they might have a chance. But at this rate, they don't have a chance, which means that they probably won't have a chance in 2020 either.
Well, I don't mean to belabor this analogy, but the fact is that these buildings that are not put into the bedrock on a land prone to seismic shifts, this is the voter will change their mind if you don't provide them with some sort of economic policies or financial, policies or anything that they don't want to hear. They'll shift if you don't have some sort of bedrock policy. And right now, I think when we look at the Democrats, they're just a little bit nicer on the progressive, a social sort of level, but their policies, their economic policies are just as brutal as what the mainstream Republicans are. Now, Trump came along, obviously, and we've already covered this 1,000 times, and he offered basically Bernie Sanders' economic platform. He went out to the Rust Belt and he said, I'm going to get rid of TPP and TTIP and all these trade deals that are making you lose everything. And they went with that. But they built everything on Hillary Clinton, who was like one of these sinking candidates, tilting, and built not on bedrock, but she was subject to liquefaction and falling over and tumbling in the actual vote.
Look, we just drove all the way through the state of Georgia, and we saw Trump Pence, and everybody in that area down at the Cracker Barrel, they were talking Trump Pence. They're still solidly behind Trump. No reason not to be. He's talking jobs. Jobs are up. Market's up. There's no reason for them not to be behind Trump. And so they're looking good for 18 and 20.
Again, like going back, the article here is about the Democrats, the fact that they don't have a platform. All they have is Trump tweets too much. Trump is a Russian
bot. They have a platform. It's called the Gallows. And once they put the noose around these folks like Clinton, Hillary, and the rest, they are going to open up the trap door, and then we can get rid of these bums for once and for all.
So back to this article, they talk about the Democratic polls, where they are actually not gaining any support, where they are actually going to have a problem in 2018. What the polls show is that the main change for congressional Democrats from their peak in 2009, moreover, is diminished trust in some of their key support groups. Under 30s are down 27 points in trust. Democrats themselves down 26 points, and liberals down 21 points. So they're losing trust among the younger population. I mean, obviously there's a shift, a seismic shift in what, we've had. We've had for the last 30 years, the baby boomers running everything. They've been the largest voting bloc. Everything is geared towards what they want and need. Now the millennials are the bigger bloc. Nobody knows what they want and need. Bernie Sanders, with his anti-trade deal stories and pitch, did grab onto something. Trump's people, whether it was Trump or his people, were smart enough to steal his best ideas.
Well, look, leading up to 2016, remember Michael Moore very publicly stated, here's how Trump can win. He said he could win in Wisconsin, he could appeal to voters. He laid out the Trump game plan. And this is exactly what Trump did, and Trump won the Electoral College, exactly as Michael Moore, who's a lefty, predicted Trump, a righty, would win. Let me return the favor and say here now exactly how the Democrats can win 2018 and 2020. I can give you the game plan right now, but you'll ignore it because you're idiots. Simply go after Wall Street banks. Go after the bankers. Even though they're your big source of funds, you've got to bite the bullet and appeal to the voter and say, we're going to go after financial crime, we're going to go after bankers, we're going to start raising interest rates. So your money is worth something. That's a winning strategy for 2018 and 2020. They won't do it because they are on a suicide mission called the Democratic Party.
And of course, there's no pushback from their favored media, MSNBC. They're speaking to those same voters that are already got. The baby boomers, that both parties, but especially the Democratic Party, has that all their policies are about the baby boomers. So here is the consequence of it in this next chart as well, that kind of goes with these polling going on, because you would think with all these scandals, investigations, stories screeching, outrage, hashtag the resistance, all of this stuff, that there was an apocalypse facing the Republican Party. But here's this chart. In a 2016 rematch, Clinton loses more base support than Trump. Percentage of each candidate's party who say they voted for their nominee in 2016 versus how many would do so again. So you see the blue line, Clinton has lost far more than Trump has lost.
It's like Weekend at Hillary's. Oh my God, Hillary is a political corpse. She's gone. She's left. Her corpus is gone into the ether. Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to San Francisco and talk with Wolf Richter of wolfstreet.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Wolf Richter. Yay! Wolf, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back on your show, Max.
All right, Wolf, we've talked to you over the years about the housing bubble, which seems to grow more insane by the year, and the retail sector, one which has definitely imploded. Let's get an update first on housing. What's going on, Wolf?
Well, we have some very interesting, very big housing bubbles in various cities around the country, and just did a little study yesterday on what's going on in San Francisco. We had an enormous spike in single-family house prices in October. I mean, enormous, going up to almost $1.6 million, and that's a huge jump. It's a 13% jump from a year ago. At the same time, and they're kind of nuts in San Francisco because there really aren't that many houses. It's mostly apartments or condos, what we call TIC, so tenancy in common apartments, and which is sort of a different version of a condo, and rental apartments. So there's not a lot of single family houses. So what sells is mostly really apartment units. And in the condo sector, they have leveled out. So they jump up and down, but they year over year they were down just a little bit. Since 2015, condos really haven't, outside of the noise, the jumping up and down, they really haven't moved much. So it seems like their condos are bumping into a ceiling. But on the house end, there's a new phenomenon that we ran into. It's kind of a regular phenomenon for October. Is we had 38 very expensive houses that sold in October. And when you have a median price, when the number of sales at the extreme ends increase, it really moves up the median price. And so this is a kind of an unusual circumstance for the rest of the year, but in October it's a fairly common occurrence that we have a large number of luxury sales that move the scale. And then usually in November, December, this drops back down, and then we get the point at the collapse in house prices in San Francisco for a few months.
Yeah, but Wolf, Apple Computer is going to be worth $1 trillion, and all those NASDAQ-listed technology stocks are worth trillions of dollars, and people live there. They're going to, and it's funny money. What's the big? If I'm making $1 million a month at Google, or more, so what? I pay $2 million for a house. What's the big deal? It's nothing. I mean, they got a lot of homeless people there, and that's a big problem. Is it going to be like that city I'm reading about that's got a huge problem now with disease on the street, hepatitis, due to the fecal matter that's accumulated on the street? It's now infecting everybody. They've got an outbreak of hepatitis. Is San Francisco, is it similar? They've got like rolling fecal matter up and down the sidewalk from the homeless people due to the billionaires that are basically defecating onto the American economy and not paying any taxes?
Well, there certainly are a lot of homeless people, and they're not just from San Francisco. It's just a very easy climate, a relatively easy climate to be homeless in. So these people come from other parts of the country. But it is a huge problem. It is a huge problem for a number of reasons. One, it just clearly shows the disparity between a very small part of the economy that is doing really well and I mean, even Apple employees, unless you're way up there, you're struggling with finding decent housing these days. But at the middle class level, so teachers and firemen and those kinds of people, those jobs, it is what we call a housing crisis, and it's the other end of the housing crisis that we used to have. This is a crisis where a middle class dual wage earner household can no longer afford to live in some of those cities in the Bay Area, and they're leaving, and those that get pushed out by higher rents or by extraordinary home prices. No, some of them myself, they've left, and they wanted a larger home that couldn't make it in San Francisco, and they leave the Bay Area, or they leave San Francisco at least. And so this is kind of the limit we're seeing in the condo area. Condos are, in San Francisco, they're not. Some of them are luxury condos, but most of them are designed for the middle class. And when the middle class can't afford them anymore, they stop buying them. And so we have this sort of ceiling in condo prices, where for the last 2 years they really haven't been able to get past that. And that makes perfect sense, because a lot of companies are moving jobs out of San Francisco too, because it's too expensive and they can't really make it work here. And so employment has stalled in San Francisco and the Bay Area in general. We've had some declines recently in total employment numbers. So it's a system that's out of whack, but there's starting to be some sort of sense that it can't go out of whack much more before it will shift, and the shift may not be what we would like.
By the way, the city with the fecal matter that is engulfing the population in hepatitis is San Diego, over there on the West Coast, not far from you. I'm listening to you describe the problem of unaffordable housing. I mean, why doesn't Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, who just moved his tax dodging affairs from Ireland to Jersey in the UK, why can't he put up a few thousand folks in Jersey where his money is? It's not getting any taxable income in America, he might be able to house these people. It's like a battery chicken farm. You know, they put in like 10,000 chickens into a coop, and then they just squeeze the eggs. Here, Tim Cook's got a battery coding farm. You've got all these bright Harvard graduates cranking out code and mining Bitcoin, and Tim Cook's got them living in a frickin' dumpster. It's beautiful. It's capitalism. It's America.
Yeah, they're already starting to build some housing for their own employees. Facebook is starting to plan on that, and some other companies are trying to do that near their campuses. Yeah, the problem with Apple is that this money actually isn't in Ireland or in Jersey or wherever. It's actually in the United States. It's invested in U.S. bonds and government bonds and corporate bonds and all kinds of things. The problem is that, and that's, you can do that, there's no problem. What it cannot do is invest this money in its business, and so it can't use this overseas money to buy back its own shares, and it can't use it, to do some other business things. So it's invested. It's not like it's sitting
right.
in the
I think that's an important distinction. In other words, Apple's got roughly, last I checked, $260 billion that they park overseas, but that's a misnomer. It's actually right there in Coopertown, whatever, Silicon Valley, but they just have it on the books. It says, France, but it's actually just a big pile of cash in the backyard of Apple. But they call it, France, they call it Jersey, but they can't use it for different purposes because then that would be a tax liability. And God forbid Tim Cook should pay any taxes. I mean, after all, he's got some magnificent slave labor made goods over there. But anyway, so San Francisco, it's the housing bubble. And we started off by talking about the retailing also. The retail sector, is that just by another good-hearted American capitalist, Jeff Bezos, the Dr. Mengele of Wall Street? What's happening in the retail sector?
Well, we have one part of the retail sector that is booming, and that's online retail, and it's e-commerce. That is soaring. There's a structural shift underway in the United States, globally, really, from buying at local stores and buying at malls to buying online. I have some younger neighbors here. I don't know if they ever go out to a mall. They get new packages every day, and some of the Generation X people and some of the baby boomers still show up at the mall. But it's really a massive shift. And there is some retail that is so-called e-commerce proof for now. That's new and used vehicle sales, and that's 21% of total retail. It's gasoline sales. It's another 7 or 8% of retail. Restaurants and bars, another big chunk, and groceries. Amazon would love to get into groceries, and it's trying to get into groceries. But it just, to its greatest frustration, it's not easy in the United States to sell groceries online. So those sectors combined are about 55% of total retail. And they're kind of under attack, but it's really, they're defending themselves, and so far they've been holding off online sales. But the other 45% of retail are completely open to attack from online retailers, and that's mostly what is being sold at malls. And so their share of what they've lost to online retail is large. It's between 20% and a quarter. In toys, it's like 35% of toy sales have moved to online. If you count video games, it's even higher. So these percentages are very large once you focus on the types of retailers that are being attacked by e-commerce. And once you eliminate those that are still getting a free ride for now.
Right. Well, of course, Amazon, Jeff Bezos wants to get into prescription drugs. And, you merge that with the opiate crisis in America. You've got out-of-control pharmaceutical companies who are getting millions of people hooked on heroin, synthetic heroin, for profit. The crystal Nacht of the pharmaceutical business has arrived in America. And you combine that with Amazon, and you've got Jeff Bezos arriving to your home via drone, and he'll shoot you up on your doorstep. If you're Amazon Prime, it only costs $20 for that hit. And you can watch Netflix and Kevin Spacey molest somebody. It's a deal. I'm telling you, it's a deal.
Yeah, now they're coming up with a new system where you don't even have to open the door, where with the help of a camera and a smart door lock, the Amazon delivery guy can come in the house, and so maybe you don't even have to step outside to get
Yeah, if
that
you overdose
pharmaceutical
on
product.
some of Jeff's smack, he'll come into your house and give you the anecdote. I forget what they call it. But that's great. That's American capitalism, and we should applaud that because it's leading to some really interesting outcomes. So going forward, what do you see in 2018? More drugs and housing bubbles?
Yeah, the housing bubbles will go on in some markets. I suspect that the housing bubble in San Francisco is running into a real problem right now. I see that in condo sales. There's a lot of supply coming on the market. That's the case in other cities too. Rents are already heading down in some of the most expensive markets, including San Francisco, New York City, and others. So there's some basic issues involved here where
We got to wrap it up. Well, basically, I think the rents are coming down in these markets because a lot of the tenants are actually now dead. All right, well, thanks for being on the show, Wolf.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition, the zombie apocalypse version of Keiser Report. Want to thank our guest, Wolf Richter. If you want to catch us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.